Alrighty, so in this video, what we're going to be looking at is a few things. The first thing we're going to be looking at is how to make an API request. And an API request, we could go into what an API is. It's basically when we could think of as when two pieces of software, and you could write both of them, but often you're going to write one piece and then another is owned by someone else, another team, or you have no idea. And it's a way of interacting between just two pieces of software where you request something and then hopefully you get something back, whether it's a response that everything went well or some actual information. What we're going to be doing in this first section is looking at an API, and it's going to call this Chuck Norris thing here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go over the internet from our local machines. We're going to get some stupid joke that someone wrote, right? And we're going to return it to our website. So that's kind of cool, right? We're at our homes, in the classrooms, wherever. We're going to write some code, and then it's going to go over the internet and go get something, which I think is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and start with our website here. Well, we're not going to be using the style.css. I always have my code off screen, and I'm just doing the styling inside of the head element here. So we're just going to go ahead and do this. And you know what? I'm just going to copy and paste this in to save time. You could always pause the video, right? So I'm going to save that, basically just making everything larger, nothing too big there. So let me drag that down, and I'm going to pull this over. Let me go ahead and just copy and paste this on in. Because even though I do teach at a college and I also do make these videos, I do forget sometimes to import stuff. And, while we're at it, we're already, far into HTML and stuff. So I'm just going to copy and paste this in from my other screen. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And this is what we get. So we have this paragraph element with an ID joke area, and we have joke, this H1 getting data. And then we have two different IDs here, and we have the joke button and we have joke button async. And so there's going to be two ways that we could handle getting information back. Now, what you should be aware of is that just because we're making API calls here, we click a button, stuff happens. Like most things in programming, there are many, 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 many layers to it. And this is a super small introduction to getting information. We're not necessarily going to get into tokens or very odd request calls and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. So we have all this right here. Nothing happens. But what I want to have happen, though, is when I click one of these two buttons, I want this joke to be replaced with an actual joke, right, that we get back. And I don't know what the jokes are. I think they're all appropriate. If they're not, I guess if they're really bad, I'll censor them out. But I don't think they're that bad at all. They're Chuck Norris jokes. So when I click one of these two buttons, this is going to change. So now that we have that, let's go in and we have this, and let's go ahead and make the first one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. I'm going to for getting stuff only. And I'm writing for getting stuff only because you could actually send information. So it looks like I'm going to be sending information because I make an API call. I'm sending a request, right? But there are other things where you could send information to be stored, or you want to update something, or you want to delete something. In this case, we're just going to be getting something. And so these distinctions are very, 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 very important when you are corresponding with an API. So just keep that in mind, that what we're doing today is just getting the information. So with that, I'm going to minimize this on over, since these are the only two files we will be working with. I'll call this joke button. And my Copilot there is right, I do believe. Nope, I want to take that off. Actually, it's not even right at all. Get element by ID. Okay, maybe in a few years AI will catch up. So we have this. We're going to be getting element by ID, this joke button, and this is what we're getting by ID, this joke button. Awesome. So now that we have that joke button captured, we're going to do an add an event listener, and it's going to be a click. And then what we're going to do is delete that out here. So now that we have this, when we click, something happens. So let's go ahead and alert out, works. Let's see if this, and it works. All right, awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and delete that. You don't have to do that, but if you're starting off or you're, whatever else, you go ahead and test it before you get moving farther along. And you see all this right here. It's getting ready for what I'm doing. And this is kind of okay, but this is definitely not what I'm going for. So as much as I love the Copilot, like I said, just ignore it when it gives these monster suggestions. And I'll hit escape there. So now what I want to do is I want to get the result, because I'm getting something back. And so what I do is I'm going to do fetch. And then I'm going to open this up. And this is actually, this is correct right here. So I'm getting this random, and let's come over here. Like, where is this coming from? So if we go to this actual website, we could actually click on this right here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm opening it up in a new tab, and you get all of this information in here. And here's the actual thing called a value. And this is very important because you see these squigglies on the outside. This is, if you remember from a few lessons ago, JSON. This is JavaScript object notation. And you can see that we have, these key value pairs here. This category, there's no category here. It's an empty array when it was created. But we got this value right here, which I think it's pretty cool, right? There's also I guess a picture you can retrieve if you wanted to. But so this should give us this entire thing coming back here, which is pretty cool, I think. That's also a lot of information. So when we're thinking of a joke, we shouldn't just think of we're getting text back. It has to be formed in some way. And there's usually additional information coming to you may want or not want. So keep that in mind. So we're fetching this. And then let's come back to here. So we're fetching this. And then what do? Well, if we look at this fetch, it's returning if we go to, I don't know. So if you look at that highlighted part above, that pop-up, we see at the far end here, and this may not make a ton of sense to you. It says it's returning a promise of a, I think a generic there of the response. And so this actually is not this JSON. This is just a promise. So this is a specific kind of object coming back. And if this sounds weird, I totally get it. So you want this joke, Chuck Norris once punched a smartass so hard he stopped for speeding 6 blocks away or whatever it says, right? So we have to essentially kind of like unwrap it and ask it to get the response coming back. So let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to do result. And then I typically will do something like this. I don't know, people have their different ways. So we're going to do then, and then I'm going to do response. And let's just console log the response out. And then we're going to return response.json. Okay, that's awesome. So then we want the data, right? And let's come down into here. And then let's go ahead and console log the data. But then what we want to do is we want to still put it inside of this joke area. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. And so we have this const joke element. And that's kind of right. We're going to come in here and do joke area. And then we're going to take the joke element. And then we're going to do that, which is, I think pretty cool. So I think we already kind of have a little weird error going on here. But then what if something bad happens, right? If there's an error, we want to catch it. And you can see this is getting kind of, what's the word? Cumbersome, right? These thens, and then a catch. This, could lead you to like the fourth circle of hell or something like that if you have a complex scenario, right? So basically we're getting the result, which is a promise. See, we could see the result as a promise by that pop-up there. And we say, okay, now give me the response. I want to log out the response, and then I want to return this as some JSON. Meaning at this point, what's happening is you're unwrapping that information. As we see, this is a JSON object indicated, like I said, by these squiggly little brackets on the outside. That's just how they chose to give it back to us, which is very common. So I want to come back down into here. And what I want to do then is I want to get the data, and I just want to log out the data right here. And then I want to take the data.value, which this is value, which is interesting because we can think of data as this whole thing. And what I want is the data.key, which will then give me the value of this joke. So in theory, this should work. So let's go ahead and test this out right here. Let's get the joke with fetch. And nothing's happening. So let's go ahead and go into inspect. We may have an issue in our console. So I'm missing a paren here. So let me go ahead and look for it. And this is the other thing too about this. There's another way of doing this, which is much smoother. So let me go ahead and look for where this may be possibly occurring. It says on line 20 here. Let's see. I think I got rid of it. So let's go ahead and do this. And now you see we get the joke. That went across the internet and came back that quick of a time, right? So on line 10, we're getting the response. And then we have all of this stuff right here. We have the header stuff, which you don't know exactly what that is yet, but that's fine. We get the URL back. This is what is really important. So status 200 means that everything went good. And there's a lot of values in the range of 200, meaning why did it go well, other pieces of information. But in the 200s means things are really cool. If you get something in a 400, that means you screwed up somewhere. You screwed up somewhere in the process. 500 means they screwed up on their end. So if I got a 500 back from this Chuck Norris API, that means something is off on their end. And I did nothing wrong, at least, for now. So keep that in mind. You typically want to see a 200 coming back. So now that I unwrapped the response as JSON, I can now come down in here in the next then, and I have all of this. And you notice this says value right here. That's cool. And then this is exactly the same text that is right here. So we unwrap it. This is coming in as data right now. And if you don't believe me, you could just look up different, or the patterns for using fetch in JavaScript. It'll be virtually the same pattern here. And now we have this, and I think that is pretty cool. So let's look at this API because there's more things. Sometimes you want very specific kinds of stuff, right? So what if I wanted to do, something like, let's see, this. So I'm clicking on this and I have an array of categories: animal, career, celebrity, all this other stuff. And what if I wanted to, make that call? Let me go back here and say I want the categories. I'm going to save this, come into here, and you notice this is an array, and this should tell you that in here it's gonna muck up because this is a key to a value, right? And that's an array that I'm asking back. So just know some stuff is gonna bomb out. So we're gonna hit save. We're gonna come back. You notice it's undefined right here, right? But what if I wanted to do data? Let's see. So if on line 14, which is right here, I am in fact getting the array back. Let me come in here, and what if I did something like this? I just want the first value. So I'm going to come in here, animal, right? If I did 1, I should get career, right? So let's come in here, do that. And I do, in fact, get career. That's super cool, right? With just some, looking at the data coming back, I can now go from a JSON kind of response to, okay, well, now I'm getting an array coming back and everything is really, really cool. Awesome. So then we see this right here. So I could get a random joke of a category. So let me go ahead and take this and I'll show you how this works. So now that it's a career joke, let's just go ahead and do this. So I want a random joke, right? And this right here, these are just different ways of separating the kinds of arguments you're going to have. Random, typically followed by, if I remember right, a question mark here is going to be like the first initial argument going on in. And so we have the category equals, and then we have these squiggly brackets right here. So do we do something like this? It's kind of weird. It's highlighting the whole thing. I don't want to delete the whole line. Do we do this? And the answer is no, we don't want to do that because, I've screwed this up before, and this is the way documentation is. This squiggly, open and close with the word category in here doesn't mean you necessarily just change what's on the inside. You actually remove everything after the right of the equal sign here. So in practice, that will just look like this right here. So we're going to save this. It's going to format it over here. Nothing big happened. We're going to come in and then we're going to do this right here. And so we notice that in fact, there is this issue going on because I'm still using, assuming it's an array coming back. Let's go back and to see if value works. I'm just blindly going along with the flow. Let's go use a fetch. Chuck Norris's first job was a paperboy. There are no survivors. So that's pretty cool. It's just the same thing as random, but now what we've done is supplied an additional argument to this thing right here, which is a category equals career. And now we could get very specific kinds of jokes. I think another one was animal, if I remember off the top of my head. So let's just go ahead and try this. Yeah, Chuck Norris once kicked a horse in the chin. Its descendants are known as today as giraffes. So hey, that works. That is super cool. So basically we get the element we want to click, and then when we click it right here by adding the event listener, we're going to fetch it, which is then going to return a kind of promise. And how do we unwrap the information? Well, we take that result, and then we go ahead and we just go ahead and unwrap it using response.json in this example. Then we're going to take the data, come in, and I'm just logging it out. You're not going to log it out at your workplace professionally, at least when it goes to production. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get the area that we want to update. And then we're going to come in here and supply the value. If there's any kind of error, it's going to log it out here. Let's see if we could get that error logged out. Let's just put in, 8 at the end here. So let's come in and see if we, interesting. So if we're actually looking at this right here, we're getting a 404, which is, we're not logging out the error here, which is fascinating. But we do get a response back of a 404, which I believe is like malformed data coming on in. So even that, if you're not necessarily getting it out on line, 21 right here, if you go into your console, it should supply ample information. And once again, go ahead and look at the status. If it's in the 400s, you screwed up somewhere, which we know we did because we forced it to screw up. So is there a second way of doing this, which could be a little bit easier? And the answer is yes. So let's go ahead and come on down. And I'm just going to keep scrolling right here. And what we're going to do is get this second button right here. And don't worry. What I'm going to do is, let's just call this the, I'm going to call this the async function right here. You may not know what that means. It's fine. And then the event listener. So event listener, we're kind of just going to do what we did above. We're going to go ahead and get the joke button async. And let's make sure that lines up. Joke button async. We're getting it by ID, so that's cool. And then we're going to do joke button async dot add event listener. And you notice that we're getting all of this very interesting stuff here. And so what I'm going to do is come up above here. And I'm just going to type out this function we're going to use. And then I'm going to explain it. So we're going to do get Norris jokes. And then we're going to do a console log of calling, let's call this calling jokes. Sometimes this Copilot thing is really freaking annoying. We're going to get a result. We're going to do an await, fetch, and then I'm just going to copy this over because it's like, sometimes my CSS and then my API calls are just, it's just annoying to type that stuff over and over again. We're going to log out the result. And then we want to get the data. And then we're going to return data.value. And if you just looking at this, it should look very similar. Let me move this on up here to what we're doing above. You see that we're fetching up here. We're getting a result. We're getting a result, right here, right? These look very similar. And then we have data.value. Then we have data.value right there. Okay. So let's come back down into our event listener. And then let's do this. Then let's go ahead and console log. Let's just do ran. And then let's go ahead and take that joke element. And then what we're going to do is the same thing we're doing above, which is just putting information into here. So when I click this, the information is still going to go here. But what happens is I click it, and async means, hey, I'm about ready to make a call to an API somewhere in the world, and I don't know when it's going to come back. I just don't. And that is telling this function then, okay, so you may not know when something's going to happen. So then what happens next is there's this await, and it says, you know what? I'm just not going to do anything at all until this gets processed. It's just gonna hang out, put its feet up on the desk, and twiddle its thumbs. And I've seen APIs that take a hot minute to run, by the way. So make sure, you know, this is part of a much broader conversation outside the scope of this course, but you want to be careful that if you're, you know, if the process is going to take a very long time, say a report is getting made, you may want your end user to know that. But if it maybe might take a second or two, you could be in a much better range of making them wait. I'm not sure. It's just another conversation. So we're going to log out that it ran. We're going to get the area that we want to then put the joke. And then we're going to put the result of that joke into here. Okay. And this, by the way, should be data.value. So if we go up to this function here, this async is the same as down here. And it's going to await what we're getting from the fetch, which is a random joke. We're getting the result, which we're going to log out. And then we're going to do this await right here. And then this is us just getting unwrapping it into JSON. And then saying we want the data and then the key, which then will give us the value of value. So enough talking. Let's get this going. And there we go. We see calling jokes, which means it runs. Line 29, this is our actual response, our result. We see that there's a 200, which is great. We get this from line 39 that this ran. So all this went through, then it made it to obviously here. And then now, this is actually an inappropriate joke. I may, you know, censor part of this. I'm not sure. You never know what you're going to get with this. But this is how you can do API calls in JavaScript. In the next section, we're going to do a very quick example for jQuery, just to show you how to do it. So I'll see y'all in just a moment. So now what we're going to do is do everything we just did here, well, minus a couple things, but we're going to do it with jQuery just to show y'all how that works. So off screen, I'm going to grab my code that works. I'm going to come into here, I'm going to slap that in. And then we're not going to do the async stuff. I'm just going to show you just a very quick example. So we're going to come into here, delete all this stuff. And then what we want to end up doing is just coming in and doing this. I'm going to do the document, ready function. Okay, now that we have that sealed off, let's come in and go ahead and get that button. So we're going to do a click function, which is correct. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things to do is when you're coding anything in general, you have so many issues with these brackets and parentheses. If you find yourself struggling, ultra common, don't worry about it. So we're going to use that selector. We're going to do get JSON. If I could type it. And then what I'm going to do is just go ahead and copy and paste from my other screen what's going on here. So I'm going to hit save. It's going to format some stuff. So we do get JSON and we're giving it the random joke. And then we're basically just going to get the data back here. So it's kind of everything we saw in the previous section is kind of doing behind the scenes for us, which is pretty dope. We're going to log out the data and then we're going to go to the joke area and we're going to take that data and then we're just going to return the value. So I think that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead. We save that. Make sure we're going in here, getting the joke button. let's go in and we could see that it works just as it did before, but it's less code we have to write. Now, there are other ways, different issues, things that pop up where you may want to set this up slightly differently. But like I said, this video is just to get your feet wet into what some of the stuff looks like potentially. So yeah, this is how you do an API call, or one of the ways you can do an API call with get JSON with jQuery. That's a lot of J's, right? And so yeah, that's pretty cool. In the next section, what we're going to do is look at how to store stuff actually in this web browser. And then after that, we're going to look at modules, which is how do you use multiple JavaScript files together? And I think that is pretty cool as well. So see y'all in just a moment. So now in this section, what we're going to do is look at all the different ways you could store information inside of the browser. We have nothing going on in here because we have nothing really going on in our code. So what I'm going to do is take this off screen, don't know what it is. So I just have some styles in the head right here, and then I'm going to come in and from off the screen as well. This isn't really doing much. Pasting this in, you can feel free to pause the video or whatnot. But we have the storage fun. They're already set. Do the following. I guess I was trying to be a little hip there, or I forgot the G. Open the developer tools. Click on the console. That's where we're going to print some of the stuff out. And it says also click on application and click on local storage or session storage. It's kind of hard to see those two S's in a row, or cookies. And these are the three things we are dealing with today. So since we are already bringing in our index.js here, let's work with local storage first. And so I'm going to bring in this comment. So as you see me go through here, maybe make more sense what I'm doing. So local storage is a way to store information inside of your browser, and it just kind of hangs out there. And even if you close the tab, come back later, whatnot, the information will persist. So it'll continually hang out. So how do we use such a thing? Let's go into here and do local storage. Let's do set item. And then we're going to do my dog. I like how it says Scooby-Doo. My dream is someday it just knows that it's going to be Bernie, right? And then I want a console log looking at local storage. It knows what I want from the, GitHub Copilot. So nothing's appearing on screen because it's a console log. So we have to go look in the console. We're going to right click, hit inspect. We're going to go over to our console. And we see looking at local storage, Bernie. Oh, that's cool. How is it getting it though, right? Like, where is it going? So if we right click on this arrow, maybe it's already present, but we want to go to application. We want to go to the local storage here, and we see my dog, Bernie, key, value. So you can think of it like JSON, right? There's a key here, and then there's a value. And this just doesn't have to be a string. This is a string value. If I wanted to store other kinds of information in here, arrays, whatever, I would be able to do that as well. But let's say I want to get rid of it because you just don't want stuff, being polluted in here. We could do to clear specific item, and we just have to do local storage, remove item. And you see now that it's gone. It gets created quickly, and then as soon as it gets stored, it gets deleted. So you just remove item, and then you remove my dog there. One thing I'm going to say about this is that whether it's cookies, session storage, or local storage, don't store anything hypersensitive like Social Security, all that plain text stuff just kind of hanging out here. That's a massive no-no, especially in local storage, since it just hangs around for a while, right? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at session storage. So how is it different than local storage? Well, session storage only persists while there is a session going on, meaning you have like the tab open and you're doing some kind of work. As soon as that tab closes, or maybe some other browser kind of cleaned up in the background, it gets nuked. And so let's go ahead and do session storage dot set item. And let's do my dog again. And it's starting to know what I want, which is kind of cool. And we'll do Bernie the Havanese. Awesome. So we have that there. Now we're going to console log. Yeah, looking at session storage. So it knows what I want. And so if we go to console, let's go ahead and refresh this. Actually, let me go ahead and remove this just so we're not clogging anything up here. And we see, looking at session storage, Bernie the Havanese. So we come on in, we go to application. We're not in local storage, we're in session storage. We click into here and we see my dog, Bernie the Havanese. I think this is coming from my server I'm running. So don't really mind too much what's going on up here. But this is the file or the data that I'm storing in here as a key value pair. And as you can see, I'm able to use it. And even though I'm console logging it out, if I wanted to use it in my normal JavaScript code, I could do that as well, which is, just fine and dandy. But what if I wanted to do to clear a specific item? I come in here and do session storage, and then I could come here and to remove my item, and you see it no longer exists. So that's super cool. But what if I had 2 of these, right? And let's just do my dog 2, and we're just adding 2's to the end. So we have this stuff right here. So we're gonna comment this out so it doesn't run. And we see that we have my dog 2, Bernie the Havanese 2. So both of these are existing. But what if I wanted to nuke everything? So clear all items. All I would have to do is session storage, and then it already knows what I want there. I hit tab, then save, and it removes everything from here. So that's kind of cool. So we have this right here, right? And let's come up here and do this as well. So now we have the local storage being set. My dog Bernie. We have this right here. So that's kind of cool, right? So this is the thing. What I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to go ahead and remove all of this. Actually, what I should do is just save that, right? So everything's commented. It won't run. What's done has been done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and I'm going to close this tab. This is from our Chuck Norris joke thing once, right? I'm going to come in here, open this up, right click, we're going to inspect it, and then we're going to go to application. And we see session storage is completely blown away. We close the tab. The session's gone. But in our local storage, this still persists, which is obviously important to know, and is the main distinction between the two. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at cookies and how to use them. And so it looks a little similar to everything up here, but there's just a few other things you have to consider while doing it. So to make one, we're going to do document.cookie dog equals, not dog hyphen. Let's just do that. So we have this right here. Inspect. We're going to go to application. And if we see in our cookies here, we have dog. And then we have this Bernie right here. I think this may have been for me. I think this is from when I was typing it originally. So yeah, that's the thing about live server. Every time you kind of type something, it like restarts. It's like a hot reload. So you may see some garbage in here. So I can go ahead and delete this because that doesn't make any sense. And so we see some of the details about this cookie right here, which is, okay, cool, fine. And so let's go ahead and do this. And this is something that's kind of interesting to me as well. So if you want to, to clear a cookie, right, you have to give it a very specific date. And so what I'm going to do is, let's do this. And it may give me an error because this is from previous code. So it may be existing, if it's existing in the past. Actually, no, this should be this year. So we have food equals tacos. And so now we have food, tacos, and we have this expiration date. And so cookies will automatically eventually just kind of go away, right? Because we could give them like a max age. So after this point in time, what happens is this thing should be nuked, right? And so that's when the persistence, just kind of stops there. So what if you want to go through and get information, the information of your cookie? You could come down in here, we could do a console log, and we could do a document .cookie. Let's go ahead and do this and see what it gives us. So we go to console, and we see this is all our cookies right here. We have dog equals Bernie, food equals tacos. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting, right? So what's the point of a cookie? We have local storage, we have session storage. Cookies are important because they always go to your API when you send it. So we did the Chuck Norris thing, right? We probably didn't have cookies. If we did, maybe they just, didn't matter to us. But when you get into the point of like authentication, certain kinds of tokens, stuff you may want to use to verify it's you so that you are allowed to use a service, you are most likely going to want to store that information inside of a cookie. Because say I'm working for the government, right? I'm some top secret spy, and I'm trying to use an API because I'm some spy hacker person, right? Maybe, and this is all plain text, which is a massive no-no, right? But maybe for me to access an API for a criminal database or a most wanted database, I need to send them the value of dog, and then they're going to be like, oh, the dog is Bernie. This must be, this person. And so we're going to allow him or her, right, in this case, him, to use our service. So while local and session storage kind of just hang out here, cookies get like volleyed around, right? And this is kind of the information that's important for the communication between you and another service. And that is, I think, really, really, really important. So another thing that I want to cover is how do you delete a cookie? And this is, let's just do delete, delete a cookie. And when you type cookie, it's one of those words that looks really strange as you type it. So one way to do it is to set an expiration date that has already expired. So I'm going to go over here, and because these are kind of long, and so let me bring this on over here, tighten that up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do this. So dog equals, let's go ahead and set that. And we see that it disappeared because this is the year 2000. And this is kind of weird syntax stuff right here. And cookies, this is where they get kind of like odd and I think a little bit messy, right? And we have to be a little bit more careful. But if you're wanting to delete them on the user end, all you have to do is just set a date in the past. And it kind of has to be in this format. So if it's not being deleted, this is most likely why. So this is local storage, session storage, cookies. This is like a, mini crash course kind of thing here. But in the next section, we're going to learn about modules. So how to use multiple JavaScript files together. And this is all in lieu of the following session where we're going to take, APIs, databases, all that stuff and start playing with them. And this should all start to kind of come together for y'all. So in this last section here, what we're going to do is look at how we could break up our code. So our JavaScript code to be more exact. So let me remove storage fun. Let me just call this there we go. Chuck Norris strikes again. Sweet. So we have this up here. So what we're going to do is return to the Chuck Norris jokes that we had earlier. And so with that, I'm just going to steal some styling off screen. I'm going to bring it on in here. So really just different font sizes for stuff. Nothing that we haven't seen. And so what I'm going to do is copy and paste some other stuff. Really just, feel free to pause but we just have an h1 paragraph tag and 2 buttons, stuff we've already seen previously. So what I want to do then is, let me expand this out here. So we have this, but let's do something called fetch.js. You're not going to want to call it fetch.js if you're not fetching data. Remember, name your files, even your like JavaScript files, kind of with like what's going on. If you name it index2.js, like who's going to know what that is? And how are you going to know like a week later what that is in that file, right? But I know I'm going to be fetching some data. So I'm going to come in here, and what I'm going to do is just copy this stuff on out from my other screen, bring it in. And you're like, Mark, you're copying a lot of stuff. What are you doing? Well, it's stuff we've already seen from like the first, half of the video. I'm going to bring this on over. And you notice we have that async function get Norris jokes. We have get joke, which originally was just in our event listener. But you notice we have these exports. Everything else here should be the same from what we've seen earlier, except we've specifically carved out the functionality into a separate file. So we have export here, and this is extremely important that you do this, okay? So everything is fine. We have it here. So how do we use it? Well, if we're exporting, we could import. So we're going to import, and then we're going to do get joke, and then get Norris jokes from, and then it knows where we want to get it from. And that is from our fetch.js file. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this because we're only using fetch.js, index.js, and then our index.html. So how does this look reimagined? So if I come in here and do the const joke button, we'll do document get element by ID, do a joke button. We can now do this. Joke button dot add event listener joke. And let's run this. And we see that it is not working as intended. So let's go ahead and inspect, see what's going on. So it cannot use import statement outside a module. So something is like effing up somewhere. So what do we do? What do we do? And the issue with this is we have to come into here. We'll space this out. And we have to tell this that it's a module, which means there's going to be multiple files. Module. All right, that's all we did is just add this in, saying there's going to be these JavaScript files coming together. And now we have this. That's pretty cool. So then what if I want to come back and do the other, the other async one, right? Our other example that we had. So let's do const, let's do joke button async. I think that's right, async, right? And then that is correct. Document get element by ID, joke button async. So now that we have that, what we could do is simply do joke button. We could add an event listener. And then what we can do in here is, and this is a little bit different than above, but still, much less work at the end of the day. We do it in async. We still want our callback to work in here, right? And so we're going to do a const result equals await, because remember, we want to stop everything until we get the actual result, the joke coming in from the function, right? And then we're going to do const joke element. We're going to get that area, which we've already seen populated with the joke. We're going to give it another joke, right? And then we're going to just write over. So we have this. So this is much shorter looking here, right? But since this is async in here, imagine if I wanted to, I could just put down, get Norris jokes right up in here if I wanted to. But sometimes I like to spell these out a little bit more. So I could come in here and hold on a second. Let me refresh this. Alrighty. So now that I'm back in here again, sorry for that really weird edit. It seems, with the GitHub Copilot, it's really good, but it also could kick you straight in the shins in other places when you just accept what it gives you. And so I was running on joke button down here. It was populating this with this value. So when I clicked the first button here, it was running twice, but I want joke button async to be running. So if I come back into here and I do this, we see now we're getting a bunch of the information back that we wanted, just like in our previous example that we were using. And it all starts by our index file. We want to have a type module, meaning we're having multiple files come together in some kind of way, right? Then in any order you want, you could write your external functionality here and you could export it. And it doesn't have to be functions. You could do it with variables, objects, whatever other cool stuff you may want to use, right? And then you could just import it this way into here, and look how much more like slim and slick your files look. And now I know that this is all just kind of hanging out right here. But if I wanted to, I could start having folders and nested folders with some of my JavaScript functionality for what I want to, for whatever I want to use it for. It could be a zillion things, right? And so this is just another way that you could produce more complex websites and stay organized. And staying organized is the key. No one wants to traverse through 90 million lines of code in like 2 files, right? Or 90 million lines of code in multiple files. Staying organized, breaking stuff up that logically should go together is very important. And using modules does that for you. So if you like what I'm doing, like, share, subscribe. See y'all in the next video.